Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share the show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is a novelist, screenwriter, and playwright. He is the writer on the podcast Mystery Theater by Prime Stage Theater, which premiered his adaptation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And he was recently commissioned for a play based on the life and works of one of my favorite authors, Edgar Allan Poe, which opens in November 2025 at Pittsburgh's new Hazelett Theater. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lawrence O'Connolly. I'm sorry, not O'Connolly, Lawrence Connolly. All of a sudden, I made you Irish.
That's all right. I've been Irish for a long time, so it's great to be here, James. Thanks so much for that interview. Or for that.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. So, obviously, there's a horror theme going on here. So, I know you're a novelist, and let's go with the adaptation of Frankenstein. How's that work for the stage?
Yeah, well,
how did you frame it, and what did you choose to focus on?
Yes, that was the challenge. I had just come back from a book tour in Mexico, and I'd come by way of L.A., where I attended the World Fantasy Convention. And I returned to Pittsburgh, and I am exhausted, absolutely exhausted. And yet a friend of mine has a play opening in Pittsburgh, and I really want to support him. Sure. So I go and see the play, and I get there early because I like to get places early.
Sure.
I'm one of these guys. If I have a flight, I want to get there 3 hours early. I'll chill in the lounge, but I just want to be on time. So I get there early, and there's nobody else in the theater. It's starting to fill up, but there's empty seats beside me. And here comes the artistic director. He walks in, he walks up the aisle, he's coming to me. And so I recognize him. He's Wayne Brinda. He's well known around Pittsburgh. And he sits down next to me and he introduces himself. And he says, I hear you have, you wrote part of the screenplay for Nightmare Cinema. And I said, yes, that's true. And he said, would you be interested in adapting Frankenstein? Now, I'd never thought of it before. I'd never considered adapting Frankenstein for the stage, but it is one of my favorite novels. I have loved that novel for ages, and I like the movies, but the novel has stuff going for it that you never see in the films or on stage. And so I thought, yeah, this is my chance to do it right. This is my chance to really adapt Mary Shelley's novel. Now, here's the thing I've always thought about Mary Shelley's book, and this is what I wanted to include in the adaptation. I've always felt that it's a terrific allegory for the writing process. I mean, here's Mary Shelley. She's 18 and she is in Switzerland. She's staying at the villa of Lord Byron. And she's married to Percy Shelley. They've eloped. He's a well-respected writer in some circles, and she's a wannabe writer. But she has writing on her mind, and she's surrounded by writers. And so during her stay at Villa Diodati, she comes up with this concept for this monster story that I think is an allegory for the creative process. It's a story about a scientist, but it's also a story about a writer, a creator, a guy who makes something, labors over it, and then realizes it's not what he intended. And it's not that it's bad. It's just that, sometimes you'll look at a manuscript and you had great hopes for it. And you look at it again in the morning and it's just terrible. And you can't believe you wrote that thing. And so you toss it aside. Well, that's okay if it's a manuscript. But if it's a living, sentient thing, you can't toss it aside. Well, that's what Victor Frankenstein tries to do. He tries to toss it aside, and that's when the unfinished work begins to take over his life. It begins to haunt him. He can't get away from it. And I've always thought that's really what it's like to be a novelist. You try to put a novel away that shouldn't be put away, and it's going to haunt you for a long time. It's going to affect your life. And so I decided that the adaptation really needs to open with Mary Shelley at Lord Byron's vacation home on Lake Geneva. Kind of like the 1934 Bride of Frankenstein, which opens with Lord Byron and Mary Shelley. But this is going to be played straight. And we move from this opening scene where Lord Byron challenges the writers present to come up with a ghost story. And of course, all the men, go ahead.
No, thank you. And not to interrupt, because and I don't know how true it was. I've heard the same story. That it was Byron and Shelley and who was like there were a handful. Who can create?
John Polidori. John Polidori, he wrote The Vampire, the first vampire novel. Bram Stoker gets all the credit, but John Polidori was there first.
So it is true. So because I looked it up and I found it like, oh no, that's not true. It's just it's a fable or it's a rumor. But okay, keep going. I'm sorry because I was going to ask about this. It's a fascinating story because I did Arcadia by Stoppard in college, and there was that whole thing about Byron and Shelley and Stoker, whoever it was, that they were all there, and it was like, you guys have to create this ghost story, I guess. But continue. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, that's it. They challenge, but see, it's the men who are being challenged. And at some point, somebody says, "Well, maybe Mary, what would you like to do?" She says, "I'll listen." And in the play, I have John Polidori saying, "Mary can judge. Mary, we'll present these to Mary." And then Shelley says, "No, maybe Mary wants to write something too." And anyhow, as the weekend or as the week goes on, Mary is turning over this idea in her mind, and she begins to come up with the bones and the sinew for Frankenstein. And so the way the play works is that Mary Shelley is in Villa Diodati, and she's surrounded by these writers, and sort of like in the Wizard of Oz film, the characters that she's with, Lord Byron and Percy Shelley and John Polidori, they become the characters in Frankenstein. And the work that she's working on is allegorically the thing that Percy Shelley creates and abandons. But she takes up on it after that time at Villa Diodati. She finishes the manuscript, and it makes history. So it's interesting that when Wayne Brinda, who is the artistic director at Prime Stage, when he first proposed that I write this for them, this came to me all as one piece. It's almost as if all I had to do was add time to it. But I knew that what needed to be done was that it needed to open with Mary Shelley, and it needed to proceed from there with Mary Shelley discovering the story of Frankenstein as she stays at Villa Diodati and tries to come up with her story to win the ghost story competition. And that's how it came about. And so I wrote this. It came together very well, and I turned it in February 2020. We know what happened the next month, right? Now, it was set to open their 27th season in November 2020, but that didn't happen. All theaters around the world went dark. But this is one of those lemonade. You get lemons, you make lemonade. And I heard you talking on one of the other interviews where talking about how during the lockdown, it was just a time to create. You certainly it's a stressful time. It's a time when there's a lot of uncertainty, but one thing, if you can find a few minutes here and there during your lockdown to create something, at least you can come out of the lockdown with something written. Well,
better.
So Wayne Brinda gets in touch with me. He says, well, it doesn't look like we're necessarily going to put Frankenstein into rehearsal yet, but would you be interested in doing an audio story, a mystery set in a theater in which there are episodes, and at the end of each episode, the listener is prompted to give some suggestions. What's the solution to the mystery? And this became Prime Stage Mystery Theater, and they had grant money for it. So I was able to write this 5-part, 5-act play to be put online in 5 installments, and have people who are patrons of Prime Stage and theater goers, have them chime in and include their thoughts at the beginning of each episode, and then have the next episode. And since it's lockdown, I don't have any actors to perform it, so I perform all the parts on my own. It's a radio drama of one, and you can still get them. They're still online, and I'll tell you later where to find them. But
sure,
we went for 5 seasons. Even after theaters opened back up, and even after Frankenstein finally got on stage at Prime Stage in 2022, Prime Stage was good enough to keep the podcast going through 7 seasons, and it only stopped because of the writer's strike. And I could have, I spoke with the Guild. I could have technically continued the fiction podcast, but they said to me, in solidarity, would you consider not, and absolutely, I'm all about that solidarity. So I had 7 great seasons, and then I was able to focus on some other things.
Sure.
So that's how Frankenstein and COVID, paved the way for prime stage mystery theater.
Not to make the comparison by any means, it just kind of takes me back to another time. Would you consider that mystery theater? Would you consider that kind of like a choose your own adventure, since you were basing it on what the audience's responses were? I'm assuming you know what choose your own adventures are.
I do, yes.
Yeah.
And I thought about that. But the way to make it work, and the way to make sure I didn't paint myself into a corner, was to completely outline the mystery. Mary Shelley's father, William Godwin, is noted for writing the first mystery thriller, Caleb Williams, and he supposedly wrote it backward. That's where this whole notion of writing mysteries backward comes from. You write the ending, you know the solution, and then you write everything else. I didn't exactly do that, but I needed to know, as I was plotting out these mysteries, I needed to know what the solution would be. And so what we did instead of having to choose your own adventure, it was more along the line of guess my adventure. Okay. But we always gave credence to the suggestions that people came up with. And the really incredible thing is, at the end of the 4th episode of the first season, we had a fellow call in, and he anticipated the ending. He didn't anticipate the ending so much as he said, something similar happened to me. It was a locked door mystery. Something similar happened to me, and this is how I solved it. And it turned out that was the solution to the mystery. Yeah. Wow. So, but we had a lot of fun hearing from the people who would have been going to theaters at that time, but instead were in lockdown, listening to things like Prime Stage Mystery Theater and offering their solutions to the clues. So not so much as a choose your own adventure, but to recommend a possible adventure that would be shared during the introductory segment, and then on with the show. Here's what I got.
Fair enough. So on that note, since you were talking about working backwards, and obviously you're not working backwards in this regard because you're basing them on the life of Mary Shelley and whatnot. And so it's not you're not even approaching it from a retelling of Frankenstein, the actual story, but rather the approach that she took, correct? Am I... Or,
yes,
do you combine both?
Combine both. There is a lot. The whole novel is there. Mary Shelley is there. She's watching the novel come about, and then we have then we transition into the scenes from the novel where Percy Shelley becomes Victor Frankenstein, and where John Polidori becomes Henry Clerval. And so we do have the entire story of Frankenstein in this play that is being presented from Mary's point of view as she is devising the story. And I had a lot of fun finding a way to get it into 5 acts, and doing so with minimal scene changes. And the one challenge was the opening and closing scenes take place in a captain's room on board a ship. And all the other scenes take place inside of houses. So the set had these French doors, had these windows along the back of the set. And in the final act, those become the windows on the ship, because captain's quarters have windows going along the back of the ship. And so very minimal set changes, we were able to go from the Frankenstein estate to the quarters of Robert Walton, the captain at the end of Frankenstein.
So let's talk about how you approach this. So you sit down, because you're not just telling Frankenstein. You're talking about the whole Lord Byron approach as well. So how do you outline this? What do you do?
How do I outline?
Yeah, like what? Because obviously, I mean, my guess is you're not just sitting down. It's like act 1, scene 1, right? And you're doing 5 acts, so I want to unpack that as well. So I want to talk about this whole process of when you sat down and this is what you're setting out to do. What's your first step?
Yeah, the first step is to have all the characters in Mary's life in an opening scene. And one of the things that I was going for there was a lot of crosstalk, a lot of interesting crosstalk, almost to the point where it's a bit like a screwball comedy, because these people are interesting characters. They're eccentric characters. You have John Polidori, who really wants to be a writer, but he doesn't get any respect. And then there's Percy Shelley, who has been dismissed by his family. He's ostracized by his family. He's living on the run from creditors, and then we have Lord Byron, who has it all together. He's got everything. He's got money, he's got women, he's got fame, and so these are very interesting characters. And putting them together on the stormy night, it's kind of a pressure cooker. And so they are, in a way, they're engaging in a lot of verbal fencing. And they are trying to do some one-upsmanship. And so it was a lot of fun writing the dialogue and having these characters play off of one another. Right. And so what I'm going for in the opening is to tease the viewer a little bit. Yeah, this is going to be a horror story, but these are eccentric characters. And here we have something that looks a lot like a screwball comedy. Right. And so at the end of the scene, after the challenge is given, the lights come down. Mary is left with her half-sister, Claire, and the other characters go off to write their stories. And Claire says, I can't wait to hear the ghost stories. And Mary says, I think I might have one. And Claire says, well, tell me that story. And Mary says, well, I'm not sure I have it yet. I have the bones of one, but I don't have the full story. And Claire says, but just tell me a story. Please tell me a story. And so she says, okay, here's a story about a creator, a creative genius. And she says, like Percy. No, not Percy. This man will be a man of science. This man will be a man of science. He'll be a scientist. And so as she begins to tell this story, the dining room table and the china closet behind it, they're all very spare on the set, so they can be changed with lighting now to look like an operating table and chemicals in a laboratory. And now we have Percy Shelley return from where he's been off writing his story, but he's not Percy Shelley anymore. Now he is Victor Frankenstein, and we see him toiling. And then there's a knock at the door, and the knock at the door is Henry Clerval, but of course it's John Polidori. So we have these dual roles taking place. So how this spins out then?
But they're not playing them. They're playing different characters, though, right?
Or
right. Are they playing themselves, but as these other characters? Does that make sense?
And then its lights go down on Mary and Claire, and we have the scene from Frankenstein. Okay. And in this way, we spin the story of Frankenstein. So as far as the structure is pretty easy, because Mary Shelley created this really terrific story, and it's nicely structured. There's a lot of stuff in it that doesn't need to go into a play. There's a lot of travelogue stuff. There's a lot of scenery. There's a lot of philosophy. You just take that stuff out. You put some of it into the dialogue, but not too much, and you keep the story going. And so periodically we have Mary wandering back into the scene, and she's saying, "No, wait a minute, this isn't quite right. He should be over here. He should be doing this. I think this will work better this way." And then we proceed with the story. Now,
so she's chiming in.
Yeah, she's chiming in. And the characters aren't so much hearing her as they are doing her bidding. And Claire is asking questions. And then the monster, or the creature, this creature that I was insistent on this, had to be the creature in the novel, not the creature from the Universal films, which are a lot of fun. But there are going to be no bolts in the neck, no sutures on the head, no cadavers sewn together, because Mary Shelley's creature is a creature that has been grown organically, much like the scientists or the natural philosophers of Mary's day were experimenting with chemicals and growing things in laboratories. Well, this creature in Mary Shelley's novel is grown from scratch. It is not sewn together. And where people get confused is that Victor Frankenstein does visit cemeteries. And he does examine skeletons and dead matter, but he does it in order to understand the nature of death and decomposition. And then the giveaway, there's one place in the novel, it's one sentence, and most people miss it, but it is when Victor Frankenstein says, because of the minuteness of the parts that I was studying, I decided to make the creature 8 feet tall and proportionably large. To make it. So where is he going to get bones for an 8-foot man? He grows them. And so so this creature has no sutures. This creature has long rock star hair. That's the way Mary Shelley, she didn't use the word rock star, but that's the kind of hair he has in the novel. And when you and this character, this creature looks exotic. It doesn't look hideous, but it's not what Victor Frankenstein intended. And because it looks exotic, it looks strange. And because it looks strange, it's feared. And because it's feared, it's considered grotesque when it really isn't. And so the creature in our Frankenstein was not sewn together, was not inherently grotesque, but was large and different looking and had a great head of hair.
I want to talk about, because you started off and you said your opening scene, and I want to know how you approach this for other playwrights that might struggle with this as crosstalk. How did you approach that? How does crosstalk work? How do you, like on the page, because obviously I'm sure it's just not you there's give and take, obviously, right? It's like, if how many characters are in this scene, by the way?
Let's see. We have John Polidori, we have Lord Byron, we have Percy Shelley, we have Mary Shelley, and we have Mary's sister Claire. So we have 5 characters in this scene. And this is the exciting thing about writing. And I started writing professionally when I was in my 20s. Started writing for the magazines. And at first I didn't know a whole lot. I never attended a writing workshop, and I never went to a writer's group, but just always just reading and writing and learning the craft. And something really remarkable happens along the way. And I'm really glad I chose this life, because an athlete learns to play a sport and then burns out by 30, right? Or 35. Sure, you can't do that all your life. You become a commentator or something, or a coach. Yeah. But a writer, you can do this all your life. So I can't really even start late. Yeah. I can't really explain how it happens, but after doing this since my 20s, I go into a zone. I just start writing. I say, okay, I have these 5 characters. I know them well because I know their histories. I've studied Mary Shelley's work. I know her story. And so I just go into the zone and I channel them. And the dialogue just comes out. And I hate to say it this way because it sounds like magic, but it's not really, because how long did it take me to write that opening scene of Frankenstein? It took me 50 years. It took from the time that I began writing in my 20s to now. And so since I had 50 years to develop this ability, now I can sit down and I can go into this zone and I can hear these characters talking, and I'm just transcribing. And I am having a blast. I am along for the ride. And really the only thing I need to do when I finish the scene is to cut, because there's going to be a lot more stuff there than there needs to be in the scene. But so in a way it's magic, but in a way it's conditioning. And if any of the young playwrights listening, or young writers listening, whether they write screenplays or novels or stories or plays, just know that, it's hard when you start out, but you get it. It gets easier. It's like riding that bike. It's like doing those things that you get these muscles. It becomes your entire body. Your entire body becomes this writing machine. And it's almost as if it's not just the brain doing it, it's the fingers, it's the whole body. And there are some times when I'm writing, when I'll talk aloud. I'll say the dialogue aloud. And I'll listen to it. And I'll see, does it sound authentic? Is this? Are there enough beats in this sentence for it to be funny? Are there enough beats in this sentence for it to really land as a zinger? And sometimes I even listen to the syllables, not consciously trying to write an iambic pentameter, but there is something really cool about iambic pentameter, the way it goes to a finish at the end of the sentence, and just try to get that musically. I'm also a musician, so that helps. I like the music of language.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because I don't sit down to write as much as I should at all. And I'll bring up Stephen Pressfield in a second, just because there's certain things that you tapped on that I want to just introduce. But I finally, just because June was crazy for me, and I'm taking the 4th through the 7th to go write, and I broke out a play and a screenplay that I'd been working on over, it doesn't matter how long, and it got like 7 chapters of a novel done. But it was interesting how, like, going back and revisiting things that had already started, where it was just like, well, that's, my God, what? No, you don't need that. That's terrible. Cut that. No. Everything just kind of fell into place all of a sudden, that back 5, 6, 7 years ago, I wouldn't have caught it. You just start to recognize where those, I don't want to say flaws, but the unnecessities, if you will. It's like you condense it. This is all you need. You can say so much with this sentence than the 5 that you wrote.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny that you say that. Are you familiar with Stephen Pressfield?
I am not. No.
Okay. So Stephen Pressfield, and forgive me, everybody, I know it's come up in quite a few episodes, especially recently. Stephen Pressfield wrote 4 books. One of them was called the War of Art. And that's why I asked, because his whole concept was resistance and the muse. That if you sit down to write, you got to make time to write. We'll do everything but write. We'll do dishes. We'll mow the lawn. We got to check email. I got to, it's like everything we don't want to do, we'll do before we sit down and write. And then the other concept he said is, if once you get into that flow state, the muse will come and deliver what you need. And that's when you were talking about that. That's what sounded familiar to me. So going back to the whole crosstalk thing. So are you just like in a flow state, in a stream of consciousness, where it's like, doesn't matter. This is what's coming to mind. I'm doing it. And then once you get to that end point, like you mentioned, now I'll go back and revisit it and cut what doesn't work. Is that kind of how it?
Yeah, that's very much how it works. There's that novel by it was Irving Stone, I think it is, The Agony and Ecstasy, about Michelangelo. And Michelangelo is asked in the novel, how do you sculpt? How do you do it? And he sees this block of marble. And maybe this is in the movie. I think it's in both the movie and in the novel. But he says, Moses is in this block of marble. It's my job to get him out. So what the sculptor Michelangelo does is his job is to cut away everything that isn't Moses, so that he comes up with the essence of Moses. Now, the fun thing about being a writer, we don't work with marble. We don't rely on the guys in the quarry to mine that marble and deliver it to us. What we do is we create the marble first. We create that block of marble. That block of marble is our first draft. And then our job is, through revision, to cut away everything in that first draft that isn't Moses. And you end up with a story. And so I do enjoy the process. I enjoy, writing that first draft, which I know is going to be cut. And then I really like going back and honing it and cutting it and polishing it. That's where the real work of a writer comes in. And that's where the more surgical work. When I'm writing that first draft, it's very much in the zone, and when I am editing, it's very clinical. Very nuts and bolts.
Do you know what you're going to write when you sit down?
I have an idea. I
And
don't know if this.
how expansive is that idea?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but I've heard that Mozart said, not, I'm not comparing myself to Mozart, but this is the way, one artist to another here.
Sure.
But Mozart supposedly had his musical compositions come to him all in one piece.
Right.
And he said all he had to do was add time. Now, I don't remember where I heard that. I can't find it, but it just makes a lot of sense to me. So the concept will come to me, it seems, almost all in one piece. And all I have to do is unravel it and add time and unpack it, so to speak. So
Sure.
I'll get a concept. It's not something I can so much put into words, but it's just an idea. It's in there, and I have to find a way to get it out one word at a time.
Sure.
And I hope that makes sense. I know a lot of this stuff sounds like magic, doesn't it? But it is just one of those things. It is
magic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right. It's like a dancer. I ask a dancer, how you do all those steps? Mick Jagger supposedly saw, not supposedly, this actually happened. He saw James Brown perform at the Apollo, and he got a choreographer. He said, "You got to teach me those steps." And the choreographer said, "I can't teach you those steps. They're too fast. I can't follow what he's doing. It's magic."
Yeah,
and he asked James Brown, "What were you doing?" "I was dancing. That's it." I can't break it down. So it's just one of those things. You get into the zone, and you're off and running.
I want to go back to the staging aspect of Frankenstein that you were talking about, and how you're in this room, and you got the table, and then it becomes the monster's table, if you will. I can't remember exactly how you phrased it, and then the French door. How is that? What does that look like on the page? Those scene changes, are they?
Oh yeah.
Is it just like this? Is it so detailed, or is it like, look, this is my concept, whoever the designer is, run with it? How does that look on the page, and does it take a page?
Yes. Well, what I did when I was writing Frankenstein is that in order to have everything in my mind, because normally as a novelist, if I'm writing a scene, I will describe the scene, and I would describe the scene in great detail, not all in one block, of course, but as needed, I will introduce those details through the narrative. But for Frankenstein, I wanted to be sure that I was able to keep track of which door people were coming in, which door people were going out, what windows were able to look out on the outside, where everything was positioned, even where the sunlight and the rain would come in when the weather changed. And so what I did is, just using a digital program, very rudimentary digital program, I created the set, very spare but very specific, and included it in the script as a graphic. I use Final Draft, and so Final Draft gives me the opportunity to include a graphic in the script. And so partly for me, because I want to keep track.
Sorry to interrupt. Is that a new feature?
That is a new feature. It's in Final Draft 11.
Okay,
I believe that's when they added it. Of course, Final Draft, I'm not a big fan of having to buy all the new Final Drafts when they come out, because of course the reason they do that is to keep people buying Final Draft. Yeah. But that was one upgrade that I thought, I need that. I need to have that ability to put an image in there. And so primarily to make sure that I was on track, I was including at the beginning of each scene a graphic that showed how the basic set was dressed slightly different in order to accommodate the action of that particular scene. And so I didn't write it out in prose or in stage directions in great detail. I had a few sentences about the stage direction, stage set that is, but that graphic really did the job. Now, when I did Poe, when I was working on Poe, I went for a much more scaled down look, even more scaled down than Frankenstein. And so basically the same set is used for each one of the acts in the Poe play.
You brought that up, and it's so funny that it took till you're writing on what? Final Draft 11? Is that what you said? Which one?
I believe it was Final Draft 11 is the one that I'm using now. Yes.
It's so funny that you say that, and it never clicked as far as graphics go, but you said it, and then
There we go.
So that's Neil Simon, Barefoot in the Park.
All right.
So it didn't click that graphics come into play to kind of give you. That's just it's so funny because that's just another aspect of another aspect of playwriting that we haven't talked about. So the fact that you use a graphic to kind of give kind of detail about that, interesting. And I'm surprised that it took till not episode 11, but like draft whatever it is, that number 11 that they finally started implementing that. Like you got rudimentary frickin' Samuel French throwing graphics in there and what the set would look like. Interesting. Okay.
And that's very much what the art that I was including looked like.
Okay.
Very
So
much like that.
all right. So on that note, so you what I guess stage directions. I don't know if it's stage direction. I get it. You're giving a picture, but are you including that? And you're saying, oh, upstage left, there's this, and upstage right, there's this. Are you doing that? Or are you just like, look, here's a picture. This is what it looks like. These are the items, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I try
into detailed,
Sure. I try not to direct on the page. I try to, as much as possible, I try to leave that to the director, but I don't necessarily do that all the time. I mean, I do come from this as a novelist and a short story writer. And so my scripts, my film scripts and my play scripts do tend to include things like that. I try to stay my hand as much as possible, but I do want to include what I am picturing in the script so that I can make sure that it's workable. I'm not really dictating to the director and saying, look, you need to do this. Sure. But what I'm saying is, look, this is possible. It can be done this way. I don't mind if you do it a different way. Sure. But this is one way that I am envisioning it. So yeah, I include a bit of stage direction, but I do try to let the dialogue drive the script.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. How do you do that?
Well, of course, there are some things that characters say that include stage directions, aren't there? Don't go in there.
That's the second time this has come up. I'd never heard that. There was a playwright that was on, just like including stage directions and like, don't walk away.
Yeah, that's right.
So, what are some of the things? Is it? I don't want to say is it a common habit, or is it a tool that you use a lot? And are there favorites or hints or ways that you do it? Like, it's like, this is my go-to. I love to do this. This is one of my tricks, if you will, if that makes sense.
Well, when it's appropriate for a character to say something that does hint at a stage direction, I will do that. I won't try to work the dialogue so that I can get rid of a stage direction. If it doesn't sound natural for the character to say it, then I'm going to just put it into a stage direction.
Okay.
But if the character is saying it and it's clear, then there's no need for the stage direction.
Okay, fair enough.
So I think that, as an example, don't go in there, Victor. I'm frightened. It's clear that Victor is walking toward a door. Right. So there's no need to say, Victor turns away and crosses to the bedroom. So that's an example. But
and I'm sorry to interrupt again. It's a brilliant example, because what you just those two sentences, and I need to start using that as well. It's like you've implemented not just a stage direction in the first sentence, but an emotion in the second.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. That to me is amazing.
So you get rid of the parentheses, frightened, in a frightened voice.
Oh,
yes, I really
parentheticals. Okay.
I really learned the power, saw the power of this firsthand, letting the director work firsthand when I was on the set of Nightmare Cinema. And David Slade, the Emmy Award winning director of Black Mirror Bandersnatch, is directing the episode This Way to Egress. And we had this, he and I collaborated on a script, which is an adaptation of my story, Traumatic Descent. And there was this scene that was set for shooting the next day. And the scene is basically just the character, a woman played by Elizabeth Razor of HBO's Haunting of Hill House, standing in a dim corridor and looking at a frosted glass door behind which there is an adult and two children, one large shadow, one small shadow. And she suspects the small shadows are her children. The voices don't sound quite right, but she thinks those are her children. And she knows that the tall man is her psychologist. But his voice doesn't sound right either, but it's got to be him because of the things that he's saying. And she has a gun in her hand. And she is listening to them talk. And the scene goes for maybe 3 pages. And it's just her listening to characters, and we can't even see those characters' faces. And I was getting a little nervous because the script is just the dialogue. It's just her listening and the two characters talking behind this frosted glass door. And I said to David the night before they were going to shoot this, I said, do you want me to, add a little bit to this? You want me to put a little bit more in there so you have something more to work with? And he said, no. He said, let's trust everybody and see what happens. And so the next day when they shot this, we have Elizabeth is reacting to what she's hearing and her facial expressions and the things that David chooses to shoot. And he has this terrific cinematographer, Yo Williams, and he's getting the right angles and the lighting is perfect. And the characters behind the doors are hitting their lines and they're just intoning everything with the right amount of urgency. And this whole thing is coming off in such a spectacular way. And it's not because I wrote it. I didn't write all that stuff. I wrote the words. But because the actors and the set designers and the director and the lighting designer and everybody else had those words to work with, they were able to create this knockout scene in that segment of the movie that I couldn't have envisioned it. And I certainly didn't have it on the page. So that's what I learned, to really trust directors. And it's when I began trying to put a little bit less of the stage direction into my scripts. Not that I've totally succeeded, but I am mindful of that.
Sure. No, sure. And I guess that goes back to the old adage that less is more.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Yeah. I mean, obviously you want to give context and whatnot. What came first, novelist screenwriting or stage plays?
The first thing that happened were stories. And
okay.
I was fortunate to come down the pike at a time when the magazines were buying stories. I had a chance encounter with the Nebula and Hugo award-winning writer Joe Haldeman, science fiction writer, who was signing at a bookstore around the corner from where I was living in Pittsburgh. And I went there. I arrived early, the way I always do, and there's nobody there, just him and his wife. And as the time went on, nobody else is showing up either, because I've learned that is sometimes what happens to writers, is that there'll be a signing and there's not a whole lot of action. But he was so gracious, and he kind of I sat across from him and told him I was interested in doing some writing, and he told me the ins and outs, gave me some ideas, and he said something I never forgot, and I acted on it right away. And it is, the magazines are hungry for good fiction. Now, this was in the late 70s, early 80s. Things are different now, but back then, a guy with no credentials could go home, write a story, send it off, and if it was good enough, get it published in a magazine, in a professional magazine. So I went home from that book signing, and I wrote my first story, beginning to end. I'd been interested in writing before that, but I hadn't really done anything. So I wrote it beginning to end, sent it off, and it sold. Now, it didn't sell right away. Okay. It got 6 rejections or maybe more when it finally sold to Amazing Stories about a year later. And
okay, there you
go. They bought the next 4 stories, and then some of those stories got optioned for film. And so what came first were the stories and the film options. And the film options were what made me realize that what I was writing really had a lot of potential for the stage and screen. Not that I acted on that right away. I went from writing stories to writing novels. And it wasn't until I got the opportunity to write one of the adaptations of one of my own stories for a film that I actually began screenwriting. And the playwright, go ahead.
Good. Nope. You were going in there right there. That was the exact question. Then the playwriting. I interrupted. I apologize. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the playwriting came because Wayne Brinda, the artistic director at Prime Stage, had heard that I had written for film, and wanted to know if I would adapt Frankenstein. So one just followed the other, and it's I can't complain. It's all worked out.
Do you have a preference?
Yeah. Do I have a preference? I do like playwriting. I just I enjoy the collaborative aspect of writing for film, but playwriting is your hands are in it more, right? We spend a lot more time with the actors. When you get a commission for a play, you spend a lot of time with the artistic director, going back and forth. For this Poe play.
And I want to get into that too before we wrap this up. I want to make sure we touch on that because I'm really intrigued. So.
Well, I'll tell you this. You will talk. This is the reason why I like stage plays, is because of the back and forth, going to the auditions, going to the table reads, going to the rehearsals. I like to sit in the audience every night and watching the show. The same thing with film. When Nightmare Cinema came out, I made a point of going to the festivals and making sure I was there to watch it with a real audience. But an interesting story about Poe. I was going to, right from the beginning, I knew it was going to be an anthology format. We were going to have Edgar Allan Poe come out on stage and talk a little bit about himself, and then talk about some of his stories, and then present 4 of his stories. And sometimes he would take part in the stories, kind of like Mary Shelley was taking part in Frankenstein, and sometimes he would stand back and let the stories go. And I had imagined that it would be Murders in the Rue Morgue, Fall of the House of Usher, The Telltale Heart, and The Facts in the Case of M. Vladimir. And my idea for M. Vladimir, this is a story about a character who hypnotizes a man who is on his deathbed and holds him in a suspended animation, interviewing him as he crosses over into the realm of death. And so my concept was to combine this with a little mystery at the end of Poe's life. Because at the end of Poe's life, he disappears for a week and is found on the streets of Baltimore, disheveled, wearing somebody else's clothes, and completely incoherent. And so at the end of my adaptation of M. Valdemar, it would be revealed that the dying man that has been put into hypnosis, who is revealing his story, is Edgar Allan Poe. Pretty cool idea, but I couldn't get it to work for anything. And I was struggling with it. And then
it seems pretty straightforward to me.
You would think I couldn't get the surprise to land. It just somehow, and probably if I'd worked on it long enough, I could have, but I was saved by the artistic director who sent me an email one day, and he said, "Hey, listen, would you consider including the Raven in this adaptation?" And my initial thought was, the Raven? You got to be kidding! The Raven can't be a play.
That's the go-to.
And then it occurred to me, wait a minute. And I got one of these moments where I got the whole concept in my mind and said, yeah, the Raven can be a play. So I threw out M. Valdemar, and the play now ends with the Raven. And all this just goes to say that when I'm writing a novel,
still revolving around Poe. When it comes to the Raven,
still revolving around Poe, exactly.
Oh, yes. Tap
Poe back into the picture. And so getting back to the question, this is why I like playwriting, because when I write a novel, it's just me. I mean, I'm very much into myself when I'm writing. I don't workshop things at all. I don't send things out until they're ready. I believe that I want the first read to be the book. But when a play is commissioned, I've got to let the artistic director comment. And so
Sure,
I like
fair
to
enough.
give it.
But on that note, Lawrence, how do you know when you're done?
Oh, when the deadline comes.
Right, but I mean, like I'm going to assume that we're all perfectionists, and we can
We are.
revisit something like, no, that doesn't work. We can go over it and over it and over it. So when does Lawrence Connolly know that he's done? Like I'm not going to look at it anymore. I'm done. When does that moment hit you?
Fortunately, I think I've come to recognize that moment. And there are times when I'll look at something and I'll say, okay, I think this is good, but it's not. Okay. But there are times when I look at something that I've written and I say, yeah, this is it. This is for really it. And it's just that sense. I didn't used to be able to do this, but now I really do think I have the wherewithal to look at something and say, yep, this is it. I know what I'm looking for. I know what I set out to create, and this is it. But there is that endless quest for perfection,
Sure.
which really does dog the artist and the creator. And you know what I find works? There's this thing called the doorway effect. Are you familiar with that? This is when you say, you're writing and you say, boy, I'm thirsty. I'd like to get up and get a soda, right? I'd like to get up and get a drink. So I get up. I walk out of my office. I walk into the kitchen. I stop in the kitchen. I look around. I say, what am I doing here? Why did I come here? So I turn around. I go back to my office. I say, a drink. That's what I wanted to do. The doorway effect. Now it happens to everybody, but this also works for writers. So if I'm sitting in my office and I'm writing and I'm stuck and I don't know where the story needs to go, I get up. I walk out of my office with the intention of doing something else. And before I get to do that something else, that idea is going to come to me because I freed up my mind. You know, that same blank moment that I get when I get to the kitchen and I was going to get a drink and I don't remember that's what I went there for. That same blank moment frees up the mind so that the answer to what I was looking for and what I was writing hits me. And I go back and I write it. Now, this isn't my idea. I have heard, and I can't find this anywhere either, but I remember somewhere the lead singer of REM saying he was writing music with Bono of U2, and Bono gave him that advice. He says, if you're stuck, get up, walk out of the room, come back, and the lyric will hit you. Supposedly, that's Bono's advice. I don't know. I can't find it. But I remember hearing it somewhere.
I wouldn't know. Last time we talked, you didn't bring it up, but no, that's phenomenal. No, I was in a position kind of similar. It totally makes sense now that you mentioned it. It's like I was discussing it with somebody. I'm like, I'm in this position. I got this dilemma, and she's like, go for a hike.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, came to me right then. We're sitting on the hike. I'm like, oh my God, how can I? Yeah, it's a great piece of advice. I made some notes, so I'm looking at them. Wanted to see what things I wanted to touch on real quick. Pittsburgh Market. What's the Pittsburgh Market look like?
It's amazing. This town, you know, if you travel, when I spend a lot of time in LA and a lot of time in New York, and when I'm there, you know, people think of Pittsburgh as a sports town. To me, it's not a sports town. It's an amazing arts town.
Sure.
We have amazing theater here. My daughter works for Pittsburgh Public for the City Theater, Pittsburgh City Theater, which stages a lot of the plays which are on their way to New York. A lot of the plays that are coming out of New York. We have the Pittsburgh Public Theater, which is a terrific repertory house. We just have a very vibrant theater scene in our cultural district, and Prime Stage is part of that at the New Hazlitt Theater. And we have 2 public radio stations here. We have a symphony. We have terrific publications art galleries. It's just a great place to work. And you know what's the best thing about it is the cost of living. You can't beat it. My brother has a place in West Hollywood, and I spend a lot of time there. I can stay there for free, but so I go in there when I do business. But then I fly back, and I can afford to fly back and live here at a fraction of what it would cost me to pay rent in LA. And so I'm just a few hours from the airport. If I'm needed somewhere, I can Zoom or I can hop a plane. And, when I'm here and I have this terrific office in my home looking out over a forest landscape, I am just into myself and I'm just into the work, and there's nothing to distract me. And so I can go out and do my business, or I can come home and do my work. It's worked out well. I cannot complain. So yes, it's a great place to live. And there was even, the Moth Radio. There was even a time a while ago I was doing hosting a story night at one of the local pubs here. It was a pub that my band used to play at, and the owner came to me one day and said, "We should do a Moth Radio style story night here," and we did. And it ran for 18 months. It was great. So we have a lot of stuff going on here. Can't complain.
I think there's some moths around LA, but I've never, and I should look at them as well. It's good to know about the Pittsburgh Market. Stan Mayer, playwright I had on like a year and a half ago. Cleveland is huge as well, which you would never ever think that Cleveland would be a good theater town. And you mentioned your brother. I know that there was talk about us doing a collaboration with the both of you, but I think that was mostly because you're doing some film adaptation of one of your projects.
That's right. Yes,
primarily fixture on playwriting, but so apologies to him, but
it's going to be released this October on October 14th. The title of the book is Minutemen, Execute and Run, and it's his concept, and it's my novel. And well, it's our novel, of course. I wrote it. He came up with the idea, but he pitched the idea to me a few years ago, and I thought it was remarkable. And so we got together at a science fiction convention one summer and just hammered the whole thing out. And basically, the concept is we've got these characters, and they're from very different parts of the world, different walks of life. They can't be more different. And each has suffered a traumatic injury, but their rehab is something that has not only healed them, but it has imbued them with special skills, special powers, special abilities. But the problem is these abilities burn out fast. They can't sustain them. And after they have used them, they are down for the count for a period of time. They are completely incapacitated. So they go from being supercharged, brilliant, fast as light, right? They go from that to being completely helpless in a very short period of time, hence the name Minutemen. And so they learn that if they are going to use these powers effectively, they need to work together as a team. They need to set aside their differences, form a mosaic of power, because when one falls, the others have to step up, not only to finish the mission, but to protect that person who has fallen. You see, teamwork is key. Going it alone is their kryptonite. And that's the concept. And so we're very excited about it. The book comes out in October. The poster is right behind me for Minutemen, Execute and Run. The publisher is Arc Manor. And we have a film. We hope that there will be a film. My brother is working very diligently to line up funding for the film. We do have the interest of a number of very high level producers. We've been working with Jonathan Sanger, the producer of Elephant Man and Vanilla Sky and Flight of the Navigator. And most recently, Cabrini. There was a movie he did this summer called Cabrini, which got amazing reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. So we're hoping, we know the novel's coming out. That's a for sure thing. And we hope the film will follow.
Good. Going back, because I know we touched on it, but I still want to know more about it. So I want to go back to the Poe play. And I know there was something you were trying to correlate that wasn't working out, and so you brought in the Raven. So is this something similar to the Mary Shelley thing, where it's like, hey, we're talking Poe, we're talking about his life, we're implementing 4 of his stories, and we're bookending it with another aspect of his life, we'll say his death, if you will.
That's right.
So obviously you're not using the whole entire everything in the story. I mean, you're obviously retelling it. So how does that look? How does that adaptation work? Where it's like, I'm telling the Raven, I'm telling Murders in the Rue Morgue, I'm telling, did you say Telltale Heart?
Telltale Heart, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So are you just kind of, how are you framing those, especially in let's say a 90-minute play about Poe, but his stories as well?
Sure. Yeah, each one was a different challenge. The basic framing device is based on something that Poe did during his life. He was a well-known presenter. He was a skilled presenter. He could fill a lecture hall, and people reported that he was a tremendous lecturer, a fine reader. And so the concept of this play is that Poe is giving a presentation about 4 of his best known works.
Sure.
And so he talks about them, he introduces them, and then in some cases he steps aside and lets the story take over. In other cases, he steps away from the podium and enters the story and takes part in it. And so, for example, the Rue Morgue, which is one of the ones that he steps aside and lets the characters take over, that posed a number of challenges, because you see, the Rue Morgue, the story is all over the place. The Rue Morgue, we have it opens. We have the 2 characters meeting. We are in one of the characters' libraries at his apartment. We are walking down a street. We go to the place where the murder took place. We go back to the apartment. We go back to the place where the murder took place. There is a story within a story where we get an account of what happened outside on the streets of Paris when the murder was taking place. All of this stuff. So it's very much a story. It's not a play.
Sure.
And so the challenge was to find a way to have the whole thing take place in a single room, and also to have the story take place that in a way that would include the monster, but would not actually show the monster. Now, the monster's on stage. We get a sense of its presence. We can hear it. We see what it does, but we don't actually have a man in a gorilla suit or an orangutan suit walking around on the stage. Because as soon as you do that, you lose everything.
100%.
Once you show that monster, it's over. It's going to be risible. It's not going to work. But
I forgot all about that aspect of the story.
So what I decided to do here was have the power of words. The words that the characters are speaking as they are describing what happened when the detective in Murders in the Rue Morgue begins to decide and determine what happened. He begins to tell the story of how this creature entered the building and entered the room. And as he tells this, we have lighting effects and we have sound effects and we have the power of the words. And this is what drives it. And so the viewer gets a sense that they see the creature. They certainly experience the presence of the creature. But no man in a gorilla suit has walked on stage with a zipper down his back and breaking the spell.
Okay, so
that was what I needed. So I needed to rearrange a lot of the stuff in Murders in the Rue Morgue so that there would not be a lot of back and forth to other locations, so that everything could take place at the scene of the murder. Yeah. And I think it works really well. I'm very happy with how it came out.
So you said you have sound. You said you have lights. Obviously, we'll forgo the costume, the gorilla costume. Right. So what I want to know is, as a stage play, what do those sound effects and lighting effects look like on the page? It's like flashes of light. Well, I don't know. I'm just curious. I want
Sure.
Playwrights that might be listening to know how do I achieve this? Obviously, you're giving it to the designer, but how do you present it on the page so other playwrights know, like, oh, I don't know how to do this. I need this special effect. I need this sound effect. How do I write it?
Capitalization. So
Okay.
as the detective is speaking, as he is saying what happened, when he speaks a sound that will be a sound effect, I just capitalize the word. And so this then frees me up from having to say, break up the dialogue, where every time he says something that requires a sound effect, include something in the margin, or break the dialogue and have a little bit of sound effect direction. No, just very simply, when there's a sound that we need to hear that the character is referencing, I just put it in caps.
So this is going back to what we were just talking about, is as far as stage directions and dialogue. It's the same thing. You're using sound effects and stage effects in dialogue as well. Is that
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think it's clean.
Fascinating.
It's nice and clean that way, and it also
Sure.
frees up the sound designer to come up with something workable, and it also lets the director work out. Okay, and the actors work out the pauses, the ways the sounds are going to work with the spoken word. Naturally, when there's a sound effect, the character would speak the sound, would reference the sound, and then there would be a pause, dramatic pause.
Sure.
We would hear the sound with the character. Then we continue with the dialogue. And there is a part in Murders in the Rue Morgue where we realize that a lot of the people who have heard the murder take place but haven't seen it, they each suspect that it was a man, and some think it was a Frenchman, and some think it was an Englishman, and some think it was a Russian. And so, for example, the people who think that it was a Russian who was shouting as the murder is taking place, they don't speak Russian. The people who think it was an Englishman, they don't speak English. What they are hearing is these animal sounds. They are ape sounds, so they have the cadence of speech, but they don't have words that anyone can recognize. So what I did in the stage direction is that I just simply said that what we're listening to are the grunts and the hoots and the growls of an ape that take on the cadence of speech. And what that sounds like, I'm going to leave that to the sound designer.
Fair enough.
But my job is done, I think, when I say that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So are you taking creative license, or are you retelling the story as it is?
The story is Poe's story from beginning to end, but the ways in which it is delivered have been truncated and adapted for the stage. So once again, there is a way to keep everything in that one location.
Sure.
To have the entire story spin out in real time. One thing that I really don't like to see in plays, and I see it, and it doesn't usually work. There are always exceptions, but it is when the scenes are too short and we go from one day to the next day to the morning to the evening. We don't need to have that passage of time. I like for a scene to take place in real time. I like for a play to take place in real time. And so this Murders in the Rue Morgue takes place in real time, where the detective arrives at the scene where the murder has taken place and then examines the clues and interviews people who are there and pieces together what happened.
Yeah.
In the story, it all doesn't happen in a single day. But actually, if I recall correctly, in the story, the big reveal where the detective explains everything that has happened take place at the detective's apartment and not at the murder scene. Mm-hmm. But it's dramatically more interesting to have it take place at the murder scene. Agreed. And so it does in this adaptation. Yeah. So it's the same story. And I think in many ways it is as true to the original as any adaptation you're going to find of Murders of the Rue Morgue. Yeah. But it has been modified so that it plays appropriately on stage. And as for the Raven, the fun thing with the Raven was finding a way to get the words of the poem to work as dialogue.
Sure.
And to have two characters. It's a two-hander. My Raven is a two-hander. And to have the Poe character, the narrator of the poem, having him speak some of the lines, but also some of the lines are being spoken by this second person who is now in the room, or is she? We're going to find out as the story goes on. But in order for her dialogue to work, I had to modify some of the lines of Poe. But as much as possible, I tried to keep the words, the sentences from the poem The Raven intact as the character speaks them.
Sure.
And I think it works quite well. I'm pretty happy with it. Good. And of course, The Raven was easy because The Raven all takes place in a single moment anyhow.
Exactly.
So that one I didn't have to truncate.
That whole entire piece sounds very Twilight Zone-ish.
Yeah.
As far as stepping out, Poe stepping out of scenes and like very, very Rod Serling-esque. So, well, this was fascinating because I will tell you that my goal is to. I have to read which I'm not familiar with. I've never read it. The Facts of M. Vladimir's Case. Thank you for introducing me to that. I've had this book for probably 20 years plus. So what are you working on right now?
In addition to working on getting ready for the release of Minutemen Execute and Run, I have my brother and I have launched a newsletter at Substack. And so we have this bi-weekly newsletter that's a lot of fun. We're including a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff about our work on the novel. We're including some videos that dramatize some of the scenes from the novel. And I think it's a first-class act all the way down. And, of course, learning Substack was a terrific learning curve. So that was something I was very involved in for a while.
Sure.
And but we are on a bi-weekly schedule now, and the newsletters are a lot of fun. We're getting a lot of feedback. People who are interested can go to ConCom Entertainment. Now, this is Con, C-O-N, the first three letters in Connolly, Com, C-O-M, first three letters in communication, and entertainment. ConComEntertainment.substack.com.
We'll include that in the show notes.
To the newsletter. And I think they'll enjoy it. I certainly hope so. If they don't, they can send me an email and tell me what's lacking. But I think it's working pretty well. And also, I am working on the follow-up to Minutemen Execute and Run. We want to have a second book come out. I'm working on that. I am hoping that the money comes for the film, and I can begin working on the screenplay. Nice. But I'd rather not write that on spec. But I will. So I'm going to focus on the novel, on the second novel for now, so we can keep the series going, and so that I can have something to submit when Minutemen Execute and Run comes out in October. Fair enough. And then where can people find your work? Yeah, I think they can certainly find it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. They can certainly find Nightmare Cinema on Amazon Prime and Shudder, the AMC horror streaming platform. But I think the easiest way to find everything is to go to lawrenceconnolly.com. You can also go to lawrenceconnolly.com. I have both domains. They both go to the same place. And when you go there, all of the tabs across the top of the website, actually the first website will have an icon for my books, an icon for my screenplays, an icon for my blog, and all of this stuff. And so you can find my music there. You can find Prime Stage Theater, Mystery Theater there. And interesting thing about Prime Stage Mystery Theater, the best place to find it is through my website. If you click on the links there, it takes you to Spotify and it takes you to Apple iTunes. But when Prime Stage, when I stopped writing these episodes for Prime Stage, they took the platform down at Prime Stage. I relaunched it on my own. Okay. So sometimes you'll type in Prime Stage Mystery Theater and it will take you to this dead zone where the old stuff is and it doesn't work anymore. But if you go to it through my website, you will find all 7 seasons of Prime Stage Mystery Theater. So lawrenceconnolly.com is the best place to find everything. And there's also minutementhenovel.com, which will link to the pre-order page on Amazon. Great. I'm easy to find.
I like it. And then last question. Are you on the socials?
I am. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I believe I'm also on Discord, although I haven't done anything there for about a year. I was on X. I'm now on Blue Sky and Threads. I should be more active. I will become more active on Blue Sky and Threads as soon as I figure out how to work them. But I have both an author page and a personal page on Facebook. I tend to use the personal page for my author page.
Fair enough.
But people can find me there, and I certainly would love to hear from people, and I do friend back. So reach out.
Great, and you can share those or send them to me, and I'll include them in the show notes. So
I will do that.
But other than that, Lawrence Connolly, thanks for coming on to this episode of Playwright Spotlight.
Oh, this was a blast. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming on to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this show with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, and until we see each other again, keep writing.